This is Jordan Poyer, safety for the Buffalo Bills, and you are now listening to Cover One Buffalo Podcast. Let's go.
It's crazy that we're already, through week one, and given everything that's been happening, that they've been as successful as it's been, given with the testing, and that, we thought that there was no chance possibly that there might even be football, and yet here we are, like, through week one, heading, straight ahead through week two. I got to say that's been pretty impressive so far how, they've executed it, very successfully through, a week in one game.
No, honestly, it's a great example. When that Schefter tweet came out right before the Thursday night game, kind of confirming that there were no negative tests for the Browns and the Bengals, when it came out, I had to read it like 4 times because my brain just kept going, wait, why is this a pushed alert? Right. It must be like something bad must have happened. And I was like, oh, it's so great that my default mindset is that, like, oh, well, there hasn't been anything yet. So if there's some pushed alert, This must be a terrible thing. And like, no, they're just confirming that there were no negative tests. It was great.
Right. Yeah. I think that's for me so far. It's just been the takeaways of how well it's gone.
Right. I work in a school district, and we've been in school for a week. And we've already had an instructional aide test positive for COVID, who came into school, was asymptomatic, somehow got a test, realized that there's like 1 million people at home, like quarantine. It's like, I work in a school system with and it's just my school. So it's like 125 teachers or something like that. And we can't even, already, 1 weekend, someone's already tested positive. And you got the entire NFL, all 32 teams, and 7 people total have tested positive for the last month or something like that. It's crazy.
It's unbelievable.
Some of these things work when you just throw $1 billion at it,
Yeah, funny how that happens.
Great point.
Yeah, $1 billion plus some good planning and execution, which I think is what the MLB didn't have. Right. But the NFL's pulling it off. So I think we've got a few people trickling in here. We'll have some more listeners coming in as we go. I think we can maybe get this rolling. So I'll give everybody a chance here in a second to introduce themselves to the listeners. But what we're doing here today is we called it NFL Lie Detector. Week 1 overreactions, annual NFL tradition. So what I wanted to do is get some folks in here. We've got people who cover teams across the NFL up on stage right now, and have everybody kind of give 1 or 2 things that they think are fact, so to speak, something that you think is sustainable, something from week 1 that you think actually does foretell the way a team or a player is going to play for the rest of the season, and something that's fiction, something from week 1 that you think is fluky, that you think people are overreacting to, and that you expect to turn around as we move forward. So I guess with that, Greg, I'll start with you. If you want to just kind of give a quick intro of who you are, we'll go around the room, and then we can dive in.
Sounds great. Yeah. My name is Greg Tompsett. I am the host of the Cover One Buffalo podcast and help run Cover One with my partners over there. And looking forward to having a good discussion today.
Dan, we can kick it over.
Yeah, sure. So my name's Dan Schneier. I am one half of the Big Blue Panther podcast, which is a New York Giants all-22 film-based podcast. And then for my day job, I'm an NFL editor for CBS Sports. So I'm looking forward to joining the app, getting to know everybody here, and, building a network out.
Outstanding.
Nice.
And I got to update my picture, too. I can't be the only one in here.
How about one of the Pats?
Twitter egg. Pat.
I guess I'll go. I'm Pat, so I'll go.
To clarify which Pat, but
I'm Pat Lane. I'm a writer and podcaster for Pat's Pulpit. Obviously talking about the Patriots, as you can see by my picture there, hanging with my boy Pat Patriot. Just talking Patriots, reveling in the fact that Bill Belichick can still somehow win without any good players.
And I'm the I'm the lesser of the two Pats, Pat Ralph. So my full time is a reporter and writer for a local news sports website in Philadelphia called Philly Voice, where we cover just about everything in the Philly region, including the Eagles, the Phillies, the Sixers, the Flyers. And then I do my own podcast called The Point After, where I cover, again, Eagles, Sixers, Phillies, Flyers. So anything and everything Philly related, I'm happy to talk about. And a lot of it's depressing right now. So that's my shtick, yeah.
Well, speaking of depressing topics, I'm John, and I cover the Cincinnati Bengals. I've been doing it since 2016 for Cincy Jungle, the SB Nation affiliate. I also help co-host the Cincy Jungle podcast, the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast. And, yeah, it's basically what I do 24/7.
Everybody here knows me, but I'm Ethan. I am a Cowboys fan. I'm going to get out of the way and let y'all cook and see if I can get the engineers to throw a force mute button together in case Pat Ralph starts talking too optimistically about the Eagles and the Cowboys fan he can't stand.
I don't have a lot of optimistic things to say right now, Ethan, so I think you're good.
All right, cool. We're safe.
I think for the most part, you can confirm that's the case for Philly writers and Philly commentators at all times.
Absolutely. That's kind of just the general malaise in the city, is just everything is wrong and nothing can or ever will be right. Yeah.
So I think that this can be, I'm sure this will be somewhat free flowing. We can all kind of like jump in and go back and forth. I don't want to put anyone on the spot, but does anybody have let's start positively. Does anybody have something they saw from week one that they think actually is not fluky and actually might be something sustainable aside this year?
Yeah, I'll start here.
Okay.
I think, and this was one of my bolder calls, I think, some would consider a bolder call. I never did, but I think Cam Newton and the Patriots are here to stay. He was my most targeted player in fantasy football, any position. I was a lock.
Hey,
I never doubted Cam Newton with Bill Belichick and, more importantly, Josh McDaniels. I never doubted Cam Newton in general, because if you look at 2018 before the injury, he had a new offensive coordinator in Norv, and he played his best football from a passing standpoint. And what I think we saw from Cam Newton week one is not going to be what we see from him every week. He's not going to have 15 rushing attempts every week. This week he won't, for example, because Pete Carroll's actually done a better job than anyone else in the NFL of stopping Cam from running the football, as I'm sure Pat is well aware. And I think we'll see a completely different Cam week to week. And eventually, when they start cooking in that passing game like he kind of did with Norv, he was really throwing his most accurate from a passing standpoint in 2018 before the injury. You're going to start to see a pass-first team there, too, at times. So, to me, this is a match made in heaven with McDaniels and Belichick, and I think they're going to win 11 games probably and win that division.
I like you, Dan. I like you a lot. I mean, I'll say, listen, the only thing to piggyback off that, I love it. I agree with it. I just, I'm concerned about the passing game. That's all.
From a personnel standpoint, I get it. Personnel-wise, there's a lot of things to be concerned about with the Patriots right now, but they've made a point of, over the last decade, proving that personnel is not always important there for winning games.
Absolutely. I guess you just haven't seen it, right? I mean, they ran the heck out of the ball against Miami. They're going to do that, I think, on a consistent basis against most teams because their offensive line, I think, is dominant. But it's going to be a question as to when a team can shut down. And Seattle's defensive line is terrible. So, I mean, scheme-wise, they have Adams, they have Wagner, everything else, but their D-line stinks. So, the Patriots should be able to run decently well against them. Maybe not with Cam, but with their running backs. But, when someone can shut down the run, the question is, can they win with the passing game? And I just, I don't know. I'd like to think they can. I don't know because we haven't seen it,
I think it's going to be interesting. You get to that middle of the season stretch where it's Broncos, 49ers, Bills, Ravens. I think that stretch is going to be the real test. How much was Miami's secondary, and the fact that, there's no sense testing that when you can pound it down their throat and you have that option. When you go through that stretch, Broncos, Niners, Bills, Ravens, that's going to be a real test of, can they pivot to more of the outside passing game when they need to, or are they still, is it a one-trick pony that's a really good trick, but are they going to be sustainable to go outside of that?
Right. Yep.
And I think something that benefits New England so well going into week two here is that, I know this sounds crazy, but there is no 12th man. that is going to be at CenturyLink Field on Sunday night.
Great call.
You've seen obviously anytime Seattle plays a home game, that crowd has an impact, especially on like a primetime game. We've seen that before. You take that out of the equation, that is a huge advantage to New England there, and a huge advantage to where you're still working with a guy who's only making his second start in an offense that he's still learning, that you had no preseason games. It was a training camp unlike any other. Like, that is a huge advantage. You take the crowd completely out of there. Not saying they're going to go over there and still win, because I think Seattle's a better all-around team, but still huge benefit to New England heading into week 2.
Absolutely. So I have a positive as well, and it's from a team that I loved going into the year that I think they're actually my pick to. I really should gamble, but I don't gamble because I always lose when I gamble, and I'm like the biggest motion on the face of the planet. But I'm sure their number was ridiculously low going into the season. But the Arizona Cardinals, I love the Cardinals. I think Kyler's going to have a massive year. I think their defense is pretty good. And the passing attack, you add in Hopkins, you have Kirk, you have Isabella. Like, I just think they're for real. They went out and they beat San Francisco week 1, and I think they're winning that division. I really do.
Pat, you kind of stole my thunder there, because that was exactly where I was going to go. The whole NFC West right now is very interesting to me. I think the Cardinals have that chance to just be that surprise playoff team. But at the end of the day, you have a first overall pick in Kyler Murray, who's making who's starting that second year ascension that we've seen with Patrick Mahomes and Lamar Jackson. So it's not exactly anything new, but all the pieces are there. You have an innovative play caller in Cliff Kingsbury. You have the easiest trade win of all time in DeAndre Hopkins, who's going to fit seamlessly in that offense. But it's almost like the changing the guard too. Like, the 49ers seem like that classic Super Bowl hangover type team that just missed the playoffs in year 2. And this, I kind of felt like it was the start, because while the Cardinals didn't play great, they just played well enough against a team that was still a home favorite in this game. And I think Kyler's only going to continue to cook more, and the 49ers just have some more problems than they did last year.
And I think even building off of that, I think the bold call I would make, NFL Live Detector, would be that this is the beginning of the end for Jimmy Garoppolo in San Francisco. The 49ers can get out of that contract next year with only a $2 million dead cap hit, and I think it's somewhere in the 20s for the overall cap hit, so if they keep him. And if you take away that 75-yard pass to Raheem Mostert for a touchdown, which was a really excellent play call by Kyle Shanahan, designed to get a one-on-one against a linebacker in space, he threw for 136 yards last week and completed, close to just over 50% of his passes. So, that's tough for me. I wasn't a huge fan of him to begin with last year, and he's coming back. I understand the receivers are injured. I totally get it, but he's also working with a really good offensive line and one that's returning all of its starters. So for me, it's tough. I think it will be the beginning of the end there.
I'll certainly take my medicine. I've been cautious with Kyler, and I saw the potential, but I also thought, there was still a lot of learning left to go, and he was being anointed based on his fantasy production more than the real world translation to winning football. And week 1 certainly was an enormous step forward there. Good decision making. The fact that he ran 13 times and only got tackled once, the other 12 were all slides or out of bounds, is, as a Bills fan, something that I can't even comprehend that that's possible for a quarterback and that that's a feasible option. But I was really impressed, and someone who I wasn't down on Kyler, but I was cautious compared to as many people were pumped about him. I certainly count week 1 as a incredible positive impression from their standpoint.
And I think it makes him look so good when you've got a guy like Hopkins who you can throw the ball to anywhere, who can do anything on the field. Anything you throw at him, he's going to catch. And just to have that playmaker is going to make you look so much. It's going to make you look so much better. You put together then with Kingsbury, his play calling, and like John said, if week 1 is alone an example of how it could play out, that trade is just going to come back to be one of the most lopsided, unfair trades we've seen there. And it's just unbelievable to see what Arizona now has and what Houston now has, and just seeing the trade-off of that, having now see Hopkins go to Arizona and then have Houston take on a running back who hasn't been himself in 3 or 4 years.
Oh, if Bill O'Brien wasn't his own boss, he'd already be fired,
So I think we've been a little too rosy here. So I do have a fact, but I'm gonna bring the tone down a little bit. With some friends in this room here who cover a team in the same city and in the same division, you'll know what I mean. But I had gone all offseason just bewildered at Jets fans trying to explain how they were going to make a run at the wild card or the division. And I kept looking and saying, this is one of the worst rosters in the NFL. I don't understand. And I kept saying they are way closer to the number one pick than a wild card race here. And after watching week 1, I feel rock solid that is going to be accurate. I don't know how they win a game this year. I'll be shocked if Adam Gase sees week 7 of the season, and that team is an abomination. I think that Joe Douglas is a smart GM. I think he's going to get things turned around. I think he's going to have a very similar Brandon Beane 2018 cleanout with NFL record dead cap kind of contract eating to happen. And then I think he'll get his new coach and everything going the right direction. But, man, that is a dumpster fire in New York.
I really hope he does get fired because that probably means Greg Williams is taking over for interim.
Yeah, I mean, every time we think the Jets have this thing figured out, they always say, well, this year is going to be different, or this year. I mean, for the Jets, it really is a top-down thing, I think. You know, you've got poor coaching. You've got a guy in Gase who, like, obviously this was not he was picked by a different front office. So you have to realize that this is not Joe Douglas's guy, and that I agree with you, Greg, that I think he's probably out, if not during the season, by the end of the season. And also, too, this is just it's a poorly run organization. Ownership is a mess. It's just, Darnold has the potential and the talent to be good, but they don't have the weapons around. That offensive line has never been consistent. Bell has not been able to stay healthy, obviously. And so, CJ Mosley, I mean, they haven't even played one game for them so far in the last 2 years. I mean, I know he's sitting out this year for obvious reasons, but when you put in, that much money into a Pro Bowl caliber player like that, you get no return. I mean, every year it's like you think, okay, this is the year the Jets are going to click. This is the year. And it's just every year it's like 1 step forward, 3 steps back.
Well, and Gase, like, the thing about Gase is that, I mean, has anyone ever coasted off of coaching a guy that didn't even need a coach? Like, he gets credit for the Manning stuff when you could roll out, I could have been Manning's coach and he would have been great. Like, it doesn't matter. It just makes no difference. And so, like, Adam Gase is this great offensive mind, except for every single team that he's ever coordinated, except for the Manning teams, have been like 24th in offense or below. It's just like the guy is a boob. He's awful. He's awful. And personally, I hope he's the Jets coach for the next 30 years. Like, it just, they don't have to worry about it. It's one team I don't have to worry about.
That's my wish. Woody Johnson comes back from his ambassadorship and gives him a lifetime contract. That's my wish.
Oh, that'd be great. Oh, Woody. What a guy.
So who's got our first fiction?
Well, I'll give you a fiction. And I think we'll agree on this, but there are a faction of people who have been kind of hitting on this a lot, and I'm just like, we got to pump the brakes on this. Like, let's slow down with the whole Mitchell Trubisky, coming back against Detroit. Oh my God, has he figured it out? He's the guy. Like, no, let's pump the brakes here. I've been seeing a lot of this and just like, be like, oh wow, look at this fourth quarter of Mitch, blah blah blah. Like, look at him making plays. Like, first off, number one, this is a guy who's in year 4. This is a guy who has not lived up to the expectations. This is stuff we'd expect from him, and like, given where he was drafted and the expectations, this is something we'd expect in like year 1 or 2, not like when he's like on the, like, he might not even come back after this year, depending on how things go. Let's also remember here, and I think, Pat, you're going to appreciate this, like, the Detroit Lions have a doctorate in blowing fourth quarter leads. Despite how much, whatever skill they have on that team, it obviously can point itself to, I think, is poor coaching. And I know every Patriot fan feels like this.
Excuse me, Pat. You do remember that Matt Patricia authored the greatest defensive play in NFL history. And so, therefore, he's a great coach in the fourth quarter.
Irrefutable.
Irrefutable evidence.
I mean, that pencil in the air, it gets you every time. It's just, it gets you. So for me, I'm not like, yeah, great for Bears fans. It's great to see Mitch making plays, yada, yada. But let's put some context around it. Like, you're playing a team that cannot hold on to a fourth quarter lead if their life depended upon it. And you're talking about a schedule. It's not like I don't come away from that game going, wow, I think Chicago is going to be better than Minnesota or Green Bay in the NFC North. I don't think that's at all the case. And they have a really tough schedule. I believe their NFC divisional opponent is the NFC South. And so you're going up against Tampa and New Orleans and Atlanta and Carolina, all teams that are going to compete and are really good, or at least, decent. So I'm just not here on the Mitch thing. And I know, anyone who watches it regularly knows that, like, this is not real, but, like, there's a lot of people like, is this it? Has he figured it out? I'm like, no, we got to pump the brakes on that.
And I think in this case, this one can actually be backed up by objective evidence, because you mentioned the coaching was the issue there. And in the fourth quarter, after playing predominantly zone the entire game, Matt Patricia, who just can't help himself when it comes to man coverage, went to man coverage in the fourth quarter. And over the course of Mitchell Trubisky's career, he's had a lot of trouble processing zone coverage. He's one of the worst quarterbacks in the last 3 years in the entire league against zone coverage. And yet, for some reason, after going zone the entire game and shutting him down, they went to man. So in this specific case, I really do feel like the coaching is objectively the reason why they lost this game.
So a quick hot take to add for this, it's going to get worse, because you're right. The Bears do have a really tough schedule, but both Packers games, both Vikings games, the Titans, the Saints, the Rams, the Texans, every single tough game is week 7 or later. Their next 5 are the Giants, the Falcons, the Colts, the Bucks, and the Panthers. So they're going to end up thinking that they're onto something, and then it's going to come just horribly crashing down to earth. And I think there's going to be an odd amount of false confidence in this Bear teams, and then it's going to just come crashing back down.
I agree with you. I mean, I can't imagine anyone having any confidence in that Bears offense. I mean, I just don't understand. How could you possibly have confidence in it? And I wonder if the Bears are smart enough to know that, because if they were, and by the way, I have zero confidence they're even going to win, like, the next few games, even when they're playing I know the Giants aren't that good, but, like, I wouldn't be surprised if the Giants won this weekend. Like, I have zero confidence in the Bears whatsoever in any game. So, like, but the question is, like, then they move on from guys. Like, do they trade Allen Robinson? I don't know. Like, should they? I hope they do, because maybe he'll come here. But do they move some guys knowing that they're just not as good as, they're not going to be competing for a playoff spot, we'll put it that way.
No, and the NFC is just too loaded. And when you're talking about those teams in the NFC that are really good and contending, what's the common denominator? Good quarterback play. And when you've got a guy like Trubisky who is just so inconsistent, Greg, you bring up a great point. I mean, that schedule, like, they may go to 2-0 this weekend against the Giants. And, like, they've got some games where they could steal some wins, but, like, it's going to create this false sense of security that, like, oh, wow, we've figured out we're really good. And then, like, that back half of the schedule is going to get ugly. But as my job is as the Philly guy in the room, it's my job to plug that they have a Super Bowl MVP on the bench there, ready to come in and save the day. So it's my job. I have to plug that, because, every Philly person has to say that no matter what,
So for the first section here, we've got a couple of interesting 0-1 matchups that I think it's going to be curious, where it seems pretty obvious, but some were teams that were thought to do a little bit more. So some are easy with the Buccaneers and the Panthers. Obviously, that should see the right team righted ship. The Niners and the Jets, that's another easy one. How about with the Vikings and the Colts? I'm going to say that some of the initial thoughts that the Vikings were immediately set to take on that division, and there is some talent there, that the turnover in the secondary is going to be too much, and that division favorite might struggle coming in here. And the Vikings, I think, and the Colts are in the same boat. I think both of them took a step back pretty materially in my eyes in week 1.
Yeah, I see no lie there. Yeah, the Vikings are a team with, like you said, turnover in the secondary, losing Evers and Griffin, losing Stephon Diggs, which is killing them there, too. It's just too much there. And then, obviously, as far as the Colts go, it's a disaster with Philip Rivers, to be honest. I actually was wrong about this one. I already feel like it's going to be a fact. I thought he would be really a much better player with the best offensive line he's ever had in his career, but he reminds me right now of where Eli Manning was those last 2 years, where he should have hung it up and he didn't. He thought he could get out there and keep doing it, but it's obvious to anyone who watches it that he just can't.
I agree. I mean, Rivers looked like a mess last year, and they were like, oh, and they paid him all this money to go there to Indy, and I'm like, what are you doing? Brissett's not great, but he's a young guy there, and you know what you have in him. Why are you giving all this money to Phillip Rivers, who has looked terrible for the last year and a half in L.A., San Diego, wherever the hell the Chargers were playing? He just doesn't have it, and now you're going to throw him on this team, and what do they even have? I mean, they have T.Y. Hilton. After T.Y., do they have anything? Zach Pascal, is that their second receiver? It's just, I don't know. I never loved. Rivers is fine. He's a good player. He's going to get into the Hall of Fame probably because of his numbers, but, he just doesn't. They just don't finish seasons. That's the Chargers' MO forever. And so now the Colts are going to they're going to, what? You think they're going to, make a Super Bowl run with the guy who can't win a playoff game? I don't get it.
Yeah, and I think going to the Vikings point, I think it's a real red flag when you see a team like the Vikings who have always been predicated on good defense give up 43 points at home. I mean, that is a very red flag. Now, I think we're also dealing with a situation here there. I think Aaron Rodgers, we're going to get a very motivated Aaron Rodgers this year, given the circumstances in Green Bay. And, we are talking about an all-time great there. But still, this is a Mike Zimmer coach defense. You would expect them to play well defensively, given, you've got you've got a lot of talent on that defense. But to have a game like that is really concerning. And Minnesota's whole thing is it's all predicated on what they can do in the running game, because you saw last year, Dalvin Cook can get going and he can open up that offense, and that allows it to get Kirk Cousins, to be able to get going as well. So I think that definitely is a little bit of a red flag seeing that. And I agree with Indianapolis. I mean, you guys hit the nail on the head with Phillip Rivers. This is a guy who we think, change of scenery, needs to come to a situation with a good coaching staff like Frank Reich and, a well-coached, developed team in Indianapolis and a good offensive line. It's all going to change. And no, it's the same story. It's fourth quarter, Phillip Rivers throwing interceptions, stuff, ruining games. So I think if you're Indianapolis, buyer's remorse is, I think, already, if it hasn't already, it's going to set in very soon.
I want to see Rodgers do it again for consistently, because it's undeniable, but the past 3 years or so, he's just been an average quarterback despite that incredible God-given ability that he has. He's just hasn't been very efficient the past couple years. But this game, though, this past week, looked like vintage Aaron Rodgers. I want to see him do it again as the season goes on, and before I just crown him as the GOAT again. But I kind of want to defend Phillip Rivers a little bit, because I think that that game, it was the classic Phillip Rivers. It was the interception towards the end of the game that basically screwed their chances. Gardner Minshew played out of his mind, but I think Rivers for the most of that game played pretty much up to Minshew's ability. He averaged 0.28 expected points added per play. His completion percentage is 11% higher than his expected completion percentage. He played pretty decently for the majority of the game, but I think you can tell that at some point when you throw 50 times in a game at that age and with his wear and tear, eventually he's going to come off at some point. But I'm not entirely ready to put it all on Rivers yet.
I hear you, John, and I don't think that after rewatching that game, I don't think that it's fair to put it all on him. But at the same time, I do think something has to be factored in the context here, which is just Jaguars' defense is very devoid of talent,
right?
And he should have had one more interception. It was called back by a penalty that I'm not sure about. But if that doesn't get called back, that's 3 interceptions in a game against a team that literally all you pretty much have to do is win the turnover battle, in my opinion, to beat. Everybody's crowning Gardner Minshew after last week. If you watch that game, it was a lot of quick. Good job by Jay Gruden. They did what they had to do to beat a team that's turning the ball over a lot. But it was a lot of quick stuff. He was 19 of 20, but it was all kind of designed quick stuff. So for me, just in that specific game, I felt like Rivers really hurt them.
Brent, thank you for saying in the chat what I was going to say was that Rodgers is not, was not, will never be the GOAT. But yes, great player, obviously. But he's certainly not the GOAT.
Pat, I wonder, who do you think is the GOAT? Is it? I can't imagine. Who do you think?
I was thinking maybe Patrick Mahomes. He's done so much. Look at how much he's done in the last year. Yeah. He's been unbelievable. He's won a whole one Super Bowl. It's been crazy. Who else could possibly come back down double digits in the fourth quarter of a Super Bowl and win? It's crazy. Anyone that could do that, once, never mind, more than once, it has to be the GOAT. So it's got to be Mahomes.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't think of another quarterback comes to mind. My memory's blanking. Yeah.
So one, and I'll throw this out there for Ethan, another one that I think is a little bit of fiction is that just because everybody hates the Cowboys so much, I think we're a little quick to throw some dirt on them. I think there's too much talent there, and it wasn't a really impressive start by Mike McCarthy, but I think we're going to see a turnaround here, and I think it's just too much talent for them to, squander with that team this year.
They need Lyle Collins back in a hurry. I mean, I know he's missing at least 3 games, but they cannot survive with Terrence Steele right tackle. I was shocked that he was even starting. Like, he was the worst offensive lineman down at the Senior Bowl. I know there's not a lot of weight down there, but like for how the offensive line once was with Dak kind of clicking into where it is now, and there's only so much you can do to replace Frederick, but that's going to be a problem with Collins out.
I respect that, John, but at the same time, they still have a lot of talent on their offensive line. If you compare, even without Collins, who they obviously need back, if you compare it to the rest of the league, and then you also factor in their skill talent, and Ezekiel Elliott, who might be, him or Chubb is probably the best between the tackles runner. It's hard for me to find excuses for the Cowboys. To me, on paper, just looking at their roster and the job that Will McClay has done there with that roster, it is arguably the best on paper. I know losing Van Der Esch early was also obviously a massive one. I don't want to hear the Blake Jarwin stuff, though, because when you have CeeDee Lamb, Michael Gallup, and Amari Cooper on the field at once, there should be a mismatch.
That's very easily the best 3 wide receiver trio in the league,
talent-wise, right? And then, so for me, it's like you can make the excuses with injuries, but even with an injury or two there's still so much more talent than a lot of these other teams are dealing with. So I just. For me, I don't know what the issue is there, but they got to beat a team like the Rams there. They're just a more talented team at this point, on paper at least.
And yeah, I still think, even looking at it from where you've got, at least coming into the season, you look at the NFC East and you look at it kind of as like it's a 2-team race coming into the year, where you look at Dallas and Philly. And even looking at it from a team that, a guy who covers the Eagles and is watching them, day in and day out. The Dallas, I agree with you guys. They have the better talent, and I the joke around Philly has been the thing that has benefited the Eagles so much these years is that Jason Garrett has been there, and you look at now, you bring in a guy like McCarthy, who is obviously a better coach than Jason Garrett is, and now you put that around that talent, and yeah, it's a bad first loss, and you guys mentioned the loss of Van Der Esch, you lose Jarwin. Obviously not a great start to the season, but the thing that benefits Dallas and the thing that benefits all these, and another point to bring up here, and I guess it is with an overreaction, but I think is a fact, is the NFC East is going to suck again. I mean, it's going to be a terrible division, I think. And I think it's going to be a lot of punching, and they're going to beat up on each other, and I just think you're going to see that the team that wins the NFC East is going to get into the playoffs with 10 wins at the very most, more likely 9. And I just think it's just, so that's why I look at it and go, yeah, even though, the best thing that happened for Philly this week was that Dallas lost, the Giants lost, and Washington's in first place, which I don't think is going to stand. But still, though, it's a really ugly division. And I think everyone's just going to beat up on each other because the NFC East always does that, but it really just feels like that way now because not one team is really great, I would say.
I mean, it's surprising to me, though, because honestly, going into the year, I was thinking Dallas was going to – I know most people thought it was a 2-team race, but I really didn't like the injuries that the Eagles suffered on the offensive line. Brandon Brooks was, in my opinion, their best player besides Lane, who was also hurt. And then you kind of have to bring back in Peters, who was kind of looking like he was getting close to done, in my opinion, last year. Now you're relying on him for a massive role. So I just felt like Dallas, on paper, was the much better team, especially if Dak continued to show what he did last year. Because for me, at least, I wasn't a big believer in Dak until last year, where I thought that his ball placement took a massive jump. And I don't know what it was, because I never thought that was the kind of thing that can improve at the NFL level. But I believe he's kind of cracked the code to it. I think he does a lot of work hips-wise and just core-wise. And I think he's really added a lot there. And he's really improved in that regard. So for me, it was like I thought Dallas was going to not only win the division, but have one of the best records in the NFL. And it just didn't look like the team I expected in week 1.
Yeah, we'll see with the Cowboys. I don't love them, but they have talent, so we'll see. And Dak should have a good year, but I don't know. But I do want to, if you don't mind, transition away from the Cowboys to another NFC team. And I'm not sure whether this is fact or fiction, depending on what we're looking at. But everyone thought the Tampa Bay Buccaneers with Yes, the GOAT. Sorry, Andrew. It is the GOAT. Tom Brady is the GOAT. But, the thing for me is that, I look at that team, and everyone was like, that team's going to be unbelievable. They're going to be 14-2. They're going to murder everyone. It's going to be unbelievable. And then week 1, they come out and just lay an egg. And I think Mike Evans stinks. I don't like Mike. I don't like him. I know.
Slander.
It's not that he doesn't stink. He's just not. I don't know. Something about him.
He's no Troy Brown.
It's true. I like Chris Godwin. I actually like Chris Godwin better. And of course, he looks like he's going to miss. He might miss. Supposedly he was back at practice, but they said he was still doubtful for week 2. So that team, they can still right the ship. They're not. No one should be writing them off yet. Like, I still wouldn't be surprised to see them win this division, win that division, I should say. But I think we need to pump the brakes with the Tampa Bay is going to be hosting the Super Bowl in Tampa. Like,
definitely.
We're not there yet.
Yeah,
so we got Andrew Jones coming in. It's like a Royal Rumble just coming down the aisle.
Yeah, one thing I definitely agree with Pat on, because we discussed this with Buccaneers insiders last Saturday, is that they thought that they were saying 13-3 Buccaneers, 11-5, the good Dak Holtz and this wonderful other person on there. And I said, just pump the brakes on that. But I had to say that one of the main concerns that I had was Tom Brady not having Bill Belichick and Josh McDaniels. And even though Byron Leftwich and Bruce Arians are 2 very smart coaches overall, that I still thought that there were going to be things that Brady was going to be exposed on a little bit that he kind of got a little bit away with the Patriots. And yes, Mike Evans, that whole thing with miscommunications on the route, where Arians said initially that it was Brady, and then after the game he said on Monday it was Mike Evans. The fact of the matter is he still threw it in the middle of the field with a safety, and Mike Evans was going to have a tough contested catch. And then, the throw out to the flats and Janoris Jenkins picking on it, that's something where Janoris Jenkins is always going to be a ball hawk. And in this particular match, as I see Sir Brent Mulberry up in here in this whole thing, is that when Tom Brady doesn't have an offensive line that's really structured on protecting him competently, I think there's going to be real questions about it, where Teddy Bridgewater, I feel, is now like the better quarterback in this contest on Sunday. Unfortunately for Teddy Bridgewater, the Panthers secondary is, let's just say, it's sometimes 11 versus 7 with their current secondary on the other side, where there's just no excuses for Tom Brady this week or whatnot. I think no matter how the offensive line is a little shaky for Tampa Bay, and if Chris Godwin plays or not, there's still no excuses, I think, this weekend. This is a game that the Bucs, if they want to be viable in terms of a playoff contender and be in second place behind the Saints in the division, this is a game that they need to win.
Hey, Pat, I have a question for you.
Sure.
As we've gone through here, and I know every Pats fan is not at all enjoying the struggles in Tampa, and certainly very concerned about his health and well-being. My only caution is, how many times have we gotten to week 4, week 5, ready to throw dirt on Tom Brady, ready to say, yep, that was it. He's not going to be able to do it anymore. And then as he gets things figured out and gets the season rolling and gets used to his new weapons, gets used to the new whatever's going on, by the time he gets to November and December, it's got it going again. My only caution is that, no training camp, none of the mini camps, none of the things he would have been able to use to get these guys on the same page. I think that we need to give it a little bit of time before we assume, nope, they're not going to be able to turn this around.
Oh, I would never. Until they are either mathematically eliminated or the playoff game where they are losing is completely 100% over, I will never, ever discount Brady and his ability, obviously, to come back and win in any situation. My thing is that people were talking about him like they were going to be the best team in the league. And I think that was reasonable. And I picked them to win because it's Brady. And I'm like, well, Brady's, he's Brady. How's he going to lose, And so
I'm with Andrew on this one. I don't think it was ever reasonable. Best team in the league, a team that hasn't made the playoffs in like a decade.
Yeah.
Well, I know. And I agree with you. But you have Brady there. You have guys. Now, this is the thing for me.
This isn't the old Tom Brady, though. This is a Brady that Bill Belichick decided to move on from.
Well, you're right about that. And you are right about that. That narrative is something that I've been talking about for a year and a half about how Brady, Belichick is the one that made the decision. Belichick decided he could have given him the Drew Brees deal last offseason and given him 2 years, and he refused to. And he did the same thing again this year. He said, look, we'll give you a year, but we're not giving you 2. And if he wanted Brady, he'd still be in New England, and he didn't. And so, listen, I agree with all of that. I just think, I wonder what arrogance. I mean, have you ever seen a coach eviscerate their quarterback on after week 1? Brand new quarterback after week 1, and he's out calling him out. It's like, what are you doing, dude? He's the quarterback, and you're going to call him out after your week 1 game?
He's done similar things with Jameis Winston, though, in the past. It's kind of how he operates in that.
I mean, I think that's crazy. It worked incredibly well with Jameis, so I mean, I'm sure nothing will backfire with Brady. It's crazy.
Well, he did it. He did it with with Kurt Warner too.
Carson,
I mean,
and Carson.
That's how. Yeah, he did it with Kurt Warner as well, and that's Bruce for you, and that's what a lot of players and a lot of people respect about Bruce is that no matter who, just like Belichick, he will treat you as the same overall.
I think we can all agree that Arians just doesn't give an F right now, and he never has. And I think it was pretty clear that the offense, at least in week 1, wasn't really matched with Brady's strengths. He was still top of the league, I think, intended air yards and time to throw. But I think the reasonable expectation was the Bucs to be competitive towards the end of the season, potentially make it as a wild card, because everyone and their mother had the Saints going to the Super Bowl and coming out of the NFC. But now we're asking questions about if Drew Brees' arm falling off, because he's not Brady's not the only 40-year-old quarterback in this division, and he's also dealing with issues as well. So if Brees is having these struggles in September, then Brady's path to the playoffs gets that much easier.
Right, it's true.
Well, they got to win this game on Sunday, I think, and the Panthers' offense is pretty viable. They should have won last week against the Raiders, despite getting run all over the place and getting thrown all over the place too. And Teddy Bridgewater, he was 5-0 with the Saints last season and played well week 1. All I can say is that the Bucs, the pressure's on them to win this game.
Yeah, Pat, I totally agree with you when you're saying that. I know there were a lot of people that are just penciling in Tampa to be playing in their home stadium for the Super Bowl, or where you see last week where Joe Buck and Troy Aikman are well, I think this is a preview of the NFC Championship. We're going to be back here come January, and yeah, that might happen, but I think it's it's just, I thought it was an overreaction too, because it's we've been talking about here. The NFC is really, really good. I mean, there are a lot of good teams. Whether we're not even acknowledging there's the team that went to the Super Bowl last year still really good. You got New Orleans. You've got Seattle. We've talked about Green Bay. You've got a lot of good teams in this conference that and I think also too, you look at coming into this game. I mean, I think the expectations that they were going to come in and just everything was going to click, I think is a little bit unreasonable, given that they had no preseason action. It was a weird training camp. This is their first time taking an in-game snap with each other. And, you're going up against a team in New Orleans that we know here is a Super Bowl favorite. And this group in New Orleans has been together for years. I mean, this is a core that has played together for years. You're talking about a quarterback head coach duo that's been together now for, 15 years. So it's just, it's not the continuity that New Orleans has is what Tampa Bay is trying to get to within, a span of 3 or 4 months here. So I personally wasn't, my expectation was not, I was actually kind of impressed that they only lost by 10, given that, how bad that first half went for them. And Andrew, I think you bring up a really good point. I wanted to echo that. I love watching that Panthers offense. That's the one reason that gives me hope about them is because, that defense is a mess and they're going to give up a lot of points, but Matt Rule's a great coach. Joe Brady, we know his track record, whether it was with the Saints, we saw what he did with LSU last year. I mean, that was unbelievable. And I've always been a fan of Bridgewater, and I liked what he did in New Orleans. I liked what he did in Minnesota before he got hurt. I liked what he did in training camp there with the Jets. He looked really good when the Jets had him in training camp.
Preach it, Pat. As a Jets fan, I've said this all the way. It was so awkward when Sam Darnold got drafted, and then they got Bridgewater. It was what are you doing? We have 2 quarterbacks. We can include Bridgewater, but this is the Jets. It's something that's exasperated. Teddy Bridgewater could be the quarterback for 3 teams right now. The Vikings, the Jets, and the Saints. So, I mean, Matt Rule knows him playing, seeing him at, dealing with him with Louisville and Temple close right there. and seeing that Teddy truly is just a guy that can be always accurate. That's something that he's always been when given the chance overall, and knows when to run if he has to, even though he's the pocket passer and is not a design runner, but he'll scramble if need be. And Joe Brady, just outstanding with his mind. The options that they have, if DJ Moore doesn't lose his mind, with Samuel, with McCaffrey, I mean, that they're no joke to sleep on. It's just defensively, it's a real problem for the Panthers.
Yeah, absolutely.
What's the DJ Moore loses his mind based off of? Did I miss something?
He had a bad penalty last week that hurt them, where he let Jonathan Abrams talk smack to him, and he just reacted, and the referee was there, and 15-yard penalty. And that was a key penalty in the game for them.
Yeah, Panthers. I like the Panthers a lot. I mean, that's going to be an interesting division because you have the Saints, and now Brent mentioned it on the on the chat there that Thomas is probably going to be out for a few weeks. I mean, they keep talking. Oh, hey, he's healing great, and it's the high ankle sprain. Like, he's going to miss a few weeks. There's just no way around it. And so, he's out for a few weeks probably. So if they take a little bit of a slide, if Carolina can put together a few wins, and if Carolina takes on Tampa, now Tampa's 0-2 and they're 0-2 in the division. I mean, that's rough. Now the good thing is for those teams is that for teams like Tampa is that you get an extra playoff spot this year. So, you can get in the playoffs at 8-8, 9-7 at this point, and you don't even have to win the NFC East to do that. You could. You could be 7-9 and make the playoffs as the 7th seed, which is crazy. So, it's going to help out. It's going to help people out that have rough starts like Tampa that can put something together. And in Carolina's, it's same thing with Carolina. Right? Carolina loses and they start out 0-2. They have a chance still to make the playoffs regardless because of that 7th wildcard spot.
Yeah, I forgot there even was a 7th wildcard spot because of COVID-19. Goodness gracious!
Yes.
Wow,
I know. That's tough to. It's tough, man. All these like weird different changes, it's just it's strange. It's strange to see, and we'll see how it all plays out. I love it personally. I think it's great. Because what the heck? Throw another team in there. Why not? Because who knows? I mean, look at all the 6 seeds that have won. Right? The Ravens were a 6 seed. They won the Super Bowl. Like the Giants were a 6 seed. They won the Super Bowl. So it's like you get a team that gets hot at the right time, and maybe they finish 7-9. But hey, if they win, they win. Like you should. If you're the number 2 seed playing the 7th seed, you should wipe the floor with that team. And if you don't, then that's on you. Like, it's just not like, they got in the play. Who cares? They were 7-9. They sucked. You should have beat them. Like, that's it.
Yeah, but the biggest thing now is that 2 seed doesn't get a bye, which is the biggest implication of it all.
100%. But you know what it does? What it does, though, is that now it makes it so that the number 1 seed in the conference is the most important thing. And I'll never forget the Patriots. The Patriots in 2015, they pulled some stupid crap, and they lost at the end of the year because they didn't want to play Pittsburgh. And I know, and of course, Bill would never admit this, but they didn't want to play Pittsburgh, so they lost to Miami and they lost to the Jets. Miami was the Steven Jackson game where they ran 49 times and lost to Miami. In Miami, it was terrible. And then they lost to the Jets the last weekend of the season. They went to overtime, and they elected to kick off instead of receiving the ball in overtime. And ended up losing. And so they lose those 2 games. They end up as a 2 seed. And of course, Pittsburgh, whatever. That was the stupid Antonio Brown game where Antonio Brown lost his, suffered CTE and has permanent brain damage from it, basically. And so they end up going into Denver and losing. The Patriots going to Denver and lose too. But now you're not playing for the 2 seed. You're playing for the 1 seed. If you're the 2 seed, you don't get a bye. So you can't be the 2 seed. You need to be the 1 seed at this point. So it's there's no messing around with seedings anymore. Oh, we got a bye, so who cares if we're 1 or 2? No. You need the number 1 spot now to get a bye. I think that it makes things a little bit more interesting for the teams at the end of the year.
Absolutely. It just puts so much more of an incentive on just not being like, all right, let's just get in the field and see what happens. It's let's get 1 of the 2 byes and we'll take our chances if we have to go on the road and the championship game. It's like, no, you need to be the 1 seed. You want to be able to have home games throughout the playoffs. And then you never know, if it gets to a point where, we've talked about it, we let off here talking about how the COVID stuff has changed everything. You get a situation where maybe you're able to have a few fans in your stadium. We've seen it already. A couple teams are experimenting with this. It happens to be the team I think probably the best team in football right now is the one that's got fans right now in the stands. Like even something like that, you get that, and then you've got more of that home field advantage. Can make the smallest bit of a difference. And it's the margin of error has gotten really thin now because of the circumstances surrounding the season. And I agree with you. Like, it's made this season so much more fascinating just given the other factors at play.
Yeah, that's a good point. So, all right, anyone got anything else?
This was a very good discussion. I want to just acknowledge really quick, Brent, you made a good point. I think you mentioned it here with Saints Bucks in the NFC Championship. That would be an amazingly entertaining game. And I think that would be with the storylines. You've got two guys who are, Breeze, who's it seems like is probably going to be hanging it up after this season. Brady, it looks like in the next, 2 years or so, having that. The only matchup I would say that would be more entertaining, I know they're not in the NFC, would be if we could get Ravens Chiefs. That will be blockbuster television. But yeah. I just wanted to say that like a Brady Breeze NFC Championship would be, it would have that feel that like Brady Manning did 5 years ago when you kind of knew that this felt like it was the end for Manning.
It'd be pretty damn cool. I mean, that's the thing that I'm excited about. Brady's in the NFC. Now you get to see Brady Breeze. You get to see Brady Rodgers. Like, what happens if we have a playoffs where it's a Brady Rodgers matchup and then a Brady Breeze matchup? It'd be unbelievable. Like we've never seen that. They've never met in the playoffs because the other teams can't make the damn Super Bowl. So it's like, they finally get a playoff matchup between two greats like that. It'd be really cool to see.
You guys can stick to the AARP candidates. I'm going to watch Lamar and Pat Mahomes in the AFC Championship. That race to the number one seed is going to be so much fun this year. I mean, obviously both teams are legit. And the game I'm going to watch Sunday because the Bengals are on, it's probably going to be that Ravens Texans game because Deshaun Watson's 0-1 now.
Yeah.
Well, it would be Deshaun, but unfortunately, he has Bill O'Brien as his coach compared to Lamar Jackson having John Harbaugh and Pat Mahomes having Andy Reid. So they keep their best guys, the pass catchers, and Bill O'Brien decides to trade DeAndre Hopkins. So.
Oh, but at least he has a good offensive line now, right?
Yeah, but that is
he's the worst offensive line in football. How are they still so bad at playing offensive line? Well, they traded everything for Laramie Tunsil. And they still can't protect
and they drafted with in terms of centers and tackles. So it just shows you that Bill O'Brien, all he does is after losing against the Colts in that playoff and losing to Frank Wright and then blowing 24-0, all he gets is then a promotion to be the general manager.
It's crazy. His own boss.
Great job, guys. Appreciate it.
All right, fellas.
This is a great discussion, guys.
Absolutely.
All right, we'll have to do it again.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's do it. Thank you, everyone who tuned in. This was great. And thank you for your questions and engagement in the discussion. And, let's do this again soon. All right, guys?
Take care, guys.
All right, fellas. See ya.
All right, take care. Enjoy the football this weekend.
Oh, yeah.